This is the lady who has put together the academic program for Camp Constitution. She has put together the classes, she's put together the schedule, she's put together the tests, she's put together everything, and we all know Mrs. Ruth Harper. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Well, thank you all very much. This class is a little unusual in that what I did is take the best of two classes to combine them, but I haven't done it in quite this form before. So toward the end, in case you're wondering what these are, they're little gift books for you, but I won't hand them out now, but I have a couple of volunteers that before we leave, you'll get those. And for now, I'd like to back you up in time to after the Revolution, so-called, or the War for Independence, and the country has been operating for a number of years under the Articles of Confederation, and those were very strongly, you know, the states had very strong powers, and the federal government was barely coalesced into anything. During that time, there was a lot of chaos, a lot of serious problems because of one particular weakness in the Confederation, and that had to do with money. It, in effect, allowed pretty much anybody to make whatever they wanted into money, so various states operated under different principles. Rhode Island was typically full of people making kind of a fast buck and so on, and they were very big on paper money, whereas in eastern Massachusetts, Boston in other words, there were a lot of merchants. They were doing business with foreign countries, and they were using gold and silver because they could get the Spanish reals or the other, you know, the pound sterling or whatever from the other countries. So then, since they were since the capital was in the east, since Boston was in the east, they decided to levy a tax on everybody and demand that it be paid in gold. Well, out on the west of the west of the hills and so on, they had a lot of farmers who had commodities. They had goods. They had the corn or whatever that they grew, but they didn't have gold. You know, where'd they get it? From the Indians? Not likely. So they, or each other, ditto, not likely. So they wanted to pay their taxes in things like wagon loads of corn, and Boston wasn't having any of it. So there was some unrest out there called Shays' Rebellion. And of course, Shays' Rebellion then served as a catalyst to make people want to change something, and they kind of picked on the Articles of Confederation. There was good reason for that. This rebellion took place, I believe, in January of 1787, the same year that the Constitutional Convention was scheduled for May. So, as I said, that was kind of a catalyst or something that made people want to have the Constitutional Convention, only they didn't call it that because all it was a Continental Congress to amend the Articles of Confederation so that they would work, they thought. Well, Thomas Jefferson, behind the scenes, he was actually in France, I believe, at the time, but he had been corresponding with James Madison and sending him books and so on to encourage Madison and to, you know, read and study the various philosophers and to come up with a good constitutional plan to present at the convention, which of course happened. But now I'm going to back you up even farther. Let's back up to 1752, when we have a fellow named Roger Sherman, and he would eventually become, I believe, the only signer to sign like probably four of the major documents: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and the Constitution. Well, Roger Sherman wrote an article, and he wrote it under a pseudonym. Y'all know what a pseudonym is? Who can say? 2 words. False name, yeah, so false identity, false name. And the name that he chose was Greek, Philo-eunomos. I should probably write that down if I can get one of these things out of here. Philo is kind of like the beginning of Philadelphia, and what does it mean? Anybody? If Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love, which it is? Brother?
Love.
Love, yeah. Philo. So a philosopher is a lover of knowledge. An Anglophile is a lover of England, being for England and philo. So Philo-eunomos, it wasn't hyphenated, I just did that to make it easier to break down. This is Greek for good. So when we say something excessively nice of someone, and maybe someone that wasn't even that good, but we're doing perhaps a eulogy, using this in the beginning. So anyway, this is good, and this is love, or possibly lover, one who loves. And this is law. So Philo-eunomos was lover of good law, and that was the pen name, or the pseudonym, of Roger Sherman, false name. Sherman. And he's the guy, of course, that signed all these documents. Well, in that, there's a little interesting story, too, to how he got to this point of writing this book, booklet, and I failed to bring one, sorry. Anyway, enough sleep here. He nailed in that little booklet what would become the major problem under the Articles of Confederation, and that was the lack of a uniform money of account. In other words, because people were able to print paper and call it money, and they had funny little, squares of paper that had odd values and so on, and the paper money was especially during the War for Independence, the term for it was a continental. In other words, it wasn't from Great Britain, it was from the continent, so it was a continental. But the sad expression that came out of that was that something is not worth a continental, meaning that it's of no account, it has no value. Because when they're just printing money and there's nothing backing it up, you know what happens, prices keep rising. Anybody seen any of that lately? And eventually people don't honor or respect the currency. And of course there's already talk that the dollar may cease to be the world currency, world standard or whatever, and so on. So we're kind of jumping around here in time. But anyway, so he had written this in 1752, and it had a fairly long name. The first word of it we use commonly just to refer to his caveat, but a caveat could apply to anything. But he wrote it as a caveat against injustice. And injustice in this case referred specifically to the unfairness of not having money of account. And of course, if you earn some money and you save it right now, and whether you put it in a mattress or put it under the bank, it doesn't matter, it's not going to earn any interest. But in a year, it'll probably only buy a third or half as much as it would buy right now. So bad money tends to not only to chase out good, which is kind of axiomatic, but it also this is terrible. The bad money chases out good. good, but it also discourages savings. That's what I was trying to think of. It discourages thrift. It discourages good habits. And when people don't do good things, what's the alternative that they typically fall into?
Bad.
Bad things, yeah. Sin and bad things go right along with bad money. If you have a dishonest money system, you'll end up with all kinds of evils in your society. So just as freedom and morality are inseparable, then because of an immoral money system, freedom and good money are inseparable. Let's see. Okay, well anyway, so the major problem in the colonies at this point is the fact that they had no money of account. So the convention in May of 1787 comes together, and they soon decide that they've got to scrap the articles and start over and just make a short, simple document. And you may not think it's short and simple when you've seen all those difficult questions on it on the entry exam and so on. But really, as constitutions go, it is amazingly short, probably the shortest in the world of national constitutions, because often other constitutions get into kind of micromanaging, and this one just goes for the principles. Anyway, Roger Sherman was present at this Constitutional Convention. It was chaired by George Washington. The unofficial secretary, the big note taker in it, was James Madison, and he's often referred to as the father of the Constitution. And of course, we also know that kind of in the background was his mentor, Thomas Jefferson. Yes, Melanie?
So the Constitutional Convention was in 1752, right?
No, the Constitutional Convention is 1787.
Okay.
I'll just abbreviate it, well, let's do it con-con. Then it'll sound more like what they're proposing to do now. Okay, con-con is 1787, and it was basically May, September. Okay, yes?
So con-con
Well, that's an interesting question.
Can you repeat
They're
the
very
question?
dangerous things.
Can you repeat the question because you couldn't hear the question?
Oh,
I couldn't hear the question.
You want both questions?
No, the question that she just asked.
The question she just asked was, is a con-con a bad thing? Well, obviously, if we got our wonderful Constitution out of this particular one, we might say that particular one was a good thing, but would one be good nowadays? That's an entirely different question. And the reason, look at the people who became leaders in that time. You had men of great character, men of strong religious and moral backbone, you might say. People that really wanted to do the right thing for the right reasons. And today, you have, I would say, in a large measure, just the opposite. So when you, in 1787, when we had Washington and Madison and Sherman and all these people, it made sense that those very bright, moral, decent individuals would put together something that would help the country thrive and to help spread freedom and so on. Today, though, we're surrounded by all kinds of problems, ranging from the White House to the Congress to all these huge bureaus of practically everything interfering with people's lives, a fairly corrupt court system in most places and so on. It'd be an altogether different matter. So a con-con now would be a tragedy in all likelihood. Okay, I want to wind this up fairly fast, and what I'm leading to with this particular thing is something that the veterans among you have recited for a year, and I don't know if you did it this morning because, shame on me, I slept in and didn't get out the flagpole in time. The preamble of the Constitution. Did you do that this morning? Oh, last night at campfire? Okay. Oh, yeah, the song. Okay, so you know the basic thing. A preamble Pre means before, amble means walk. So the preamble walks before the Constitution, and in effect it introduces it. Well, the interesting connection between Roger Sherman and the preamble and the Constitution lie in this whole money issue. Roger Sherman was responsible for saying that Congress shall coin money, basically. That's what in other words, money would be only gold or silver. And in case you didn't get it from Article 1, Section 8, and I know this will be reiterated in another class, if they'll all, or most all be in. I gotta get a new brain. This one's getting defective. Okay, in Article 1, Section 8, you have the thing about Congress shall coin money, and they'll have, honest weights and measures, standard of weights and measures, and so on. But then in Article 1, Section 10, he gets written into the Constitution a little restriction to the effect that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debt. So you've got two places in the Constitution that make it very clear that money is to be real. It's to be gold or it's to be silver, and no state can get around it, and no federal government can. Now that's in the Constitution. Okay, so what do we got today? Do we have gold and silver?
No.
No, we've got these fake notes in our pocket. Now they say Federal Reserve, no. Well, they're not federal. It's not a reserve because, it's just trees that they're cutting down and turning into fake dollars. And it's not a note because a note is a promise to pay. And our modern money is not a promise to pay. When I was growing up, a long, long time ago, money was still a promise to pay. If you had a $1 bill in your pocket, it said on it, silver certificate. And then it further said that the United States Treasury, or there's $1 in silver on deposit at the United States Treasury, and it's payable to the bearer, the holder, the person carrying it, upon demand at any Federal Reserve, at any U.S. bank or U.S. Treasury or anyway. And it also said this note is legal tender for all debts public and private and is redeemable in lawful money. And again, lawful money is gold and silver. So now I just want to go back to the preamble a minute. You'll see shortly how this ties in, because I will name elements of the preamble that you have recited and heard and so on. And then I will add parenthetically what it would mean in terms of money. So we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, in order to have uniform currency, uniform money of account, not this no account paper stuff, but money of account, and sure domestic tranquility. Well, what's the big problem that we had just mentioned? What was that rebellion called? Shays' Rebellion was an example of rioting and so on going on over the lack of money. And so by what they meant by ensure domestic tranquility is within the borders of the country, there would be peace because nobody would be rioting over money and taxes, because it would all be clear and fair, and everybody had the same thing available to them. Okay, provide for the common defense. One of the big problems, the American Revolution, think of Valley Forge. What was one of the big problems there? Anybody know?
Lack of supplies.
Lack of supplies. The soldiers were starving. They were going around in the snow wrapping their feet in cloth because their boots had worn out on these marches and things. They had no money of account with which to buy things, and they were in Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, and a lot of those good Dutch farmers wouldn't take the fake money. So if they were paid at all, they were paid in continentals, and it wouldn't buy anything. How would you like it if you worked and were paid, and then you couldn't get anything for it? Everybody say, I don't want that stuff. if you've never had that experience, it's something that you may gain in the next few years. We had it once in France where, well, somebody that wasn't too sharp waited on us. And there'd been a 3-day religious holiday and we didn't have enough money exchanged. I mean, enough of our dollars had not yet been converted to French francs. And we went in and filled up the tank with gas, and then this guy didn't want, by the way, $10 would have paid for the tank of gas. But he didn't want to take our $10 bill. And he got all excited and started shouting, and I think he was swearing at us in French. But his mother came out, she heard the ruckus, and came out, and she said, now, it's okay. And she opened the newspaper, and she found the rate of exchange, and told us it would be whatever it was. And then she gave us change in French francs and so on. But that's the kind of thing that was going on there. They had the money, they thought, they tried to buy things, and then it turned out it wasn't money. Okay, so providing for the common defense, it includes a lot of things, obviously. It includes having the guns and the ammunition and the right caliber and all the other stuff. But it also includes paying people in real money. Promote the general welfare. Now again, that doesn't mean give out free money to people. What it means is create conditions so that a free market can thrive and business will, good businesses will remain and go on and grow and so on, and people can make a decent living, etc. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. If you have real money, that is certainly one of the major blessings of liberty. And I'm not downplaying any of the others. There's a reason why the First Amendment lists the things that it does, and the Second Amendment the things that it does. But having real money is extremely important. And yes. So securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves means if we have it, if we earn it, we have it, we can save it or spend it successfully. And if we save it, it will retain its value because gold and silver always have value. And if we have some left at the point where our life is closing down, we can will it to our children, our posterity. So we can, the posterity are the people who come after. P-O-S-T at the beginning of a word generally signals after, so the people who come after us are our posterity. So it's a blessing to ourselves and our offspring. Okay, now, in order to do all those things, what do? We do ordain and establish this Constitution for, and who's the other party here? The United States of America. And this was done in convention, I'm quoting now from what's written after Article 7, done in the year of our Lord 1787, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 12th. So it's the 12th year of independence. The Constitution was ratified by the requisite 9 states in 1788, and it's right thereafter that they had an election, so that in March 4th of 1789, they could form the new government. They had the old one under the Articles of Confederation. They'd already had 7 presidents before George Washington, first of which I think was named Hanson. But anyway, so this new Constitution did a lot of good, and that good was foreshadowed, if you will, by the Preamble. Any questions on this part of the discussion, class? Okay. I see a lot of yawns. That worries me a little bit, but on the other hand, I apologize for my having not slept well enough to keep my brain oiled up here. Anyway, we're going to switch now if there's no further discussion on that. But I do want you to know why I believe that the Constitution is so important, and why Roger Sherman was such a key figure in our history, participating in all those things after having discovered way back when. And by the way, that was as a result of a misunderstanding. He had a printing business, And he was given a big job by somebody from somewhere else, and he assumed when he quoted a price that they would be paying in gold, but he hadn't nailed it down, and so they tried to pay him in paper, and he took them to court and had to study law on the side to fight his case and so on. And when he didn't win, he wrote this caveat against injustice. So that's the background of that. But there is in this country an office that in a way is more powerful than any of the other offices. And any one of us can honestly expect perhaps to be asked to participate in it at some point. And that is to be a juror, to be on a jury. And there's various reasons why that's important. And of course, a part of establishing justice, which was going on with the Constitution, is to have a decent court system. And of course, in English common law, they had already developed the whole idea of a jury, but they didn't always take it. You know, they had a lot of ideas about freedom in England, but they didn't always act properly upon them. So there was an instance, I could probably find a year here, maybe not. Anyway, in the 16-somethings, I believe, that there was a man tried, and he was tried of all things basically for being a street preacher. He believed in what he believed in, but it wasn't the same as what the Church of England did. So, oh, am I annoying you with running around? Anyway, he was preaching the things that he was finding in the Bible that weren't being dealt with, or weren't being dealt with properly as he saw it, or correctly, by the Church of England. And this man was put on trial, and the probable penalty would have been either hanging or burning at the stake. And interestingly, some of you may be from a state that is actually named for this man. Anybody belong to the state of, or from the state of Penn's Woods? Pennsylvania? Okay. That's what Pennsylvania means, is Penn's Woods. Again, Sylvan or Sylvania has to do with the woods. So if somebody talks about, you know, beautiful sylvan landscape or something, it's a wooded place. Anyway, the King of England had owed Penn's father some money, a large sum of money. And here Penn was on trial for his life, and it was thought that he would be condemned and he would be killed, which I suppose might have freed up the king from this debt. But there was a jury, and the judge told the jury, you know, sort of with the same thing they tell you now if you're on a jury, you guys just decide if he really did it, and I'll decide the law. And they said no. In effect, they said no, that's not the way it works. If there's an unjust law, we won't condemn anybody under it. A new concept, but very, very important, because oh, thank you for your appreciation of that point. And seriously, one of the reasons that I want to see to it that every one of you gets a copy of this little booklet is because there's that kind of information in it. In fact, there's a very interesting article starting already on page 5, and let me just run by a little bit of that with you. We're still doing all right on time. As a juror in a trial setting, when it comes to your individual vote of innocent or guilty, you truly are answerable only to God Almighty. In other words, you have to do what your conscience tells you to do. You have to do what's right. And he goes on to say, the First Amendment to the Constitution was born out of this great concept. However, judges of today refuse to inform jurors of their rights. But the Minneapolis Star and Tribune, of all places, that's a pretty liberal big city. I think they have some kind of UN sign that says you drive in and so on. Anyway, the Minneapolis Star and Tribune in November 30th, 1984, had an article titled "What Judges Don't Tell the Juries." And it said, at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, the jury's role as defense against political oppression was unquestioned in American jurisprudence. In other words, everybody knew you ruled on the law as well as on the facts of the case. So if it's a simple case where an actual, criminally minded person did a crime, and you have the evidence that he did it beyond the reasonable shadow of doubt, reasonable doubt, or beyond whatever, however it goes, then obviously you would say he's guilty. But if the law was a very bad law, and there were some bad ones even in this country, then your conscience would prevent you from condemning that person. A case came up in 1857, and you may have heard of the decision, you may just have heard of the name of it, may have heard of the Dred Scott decision. Okay, so Dred Scott had been a slave in the South. He escaped to a northern state, and under the part of the Constitution that has to do with the relation of states to each other, it says that full faith and credit has to be given to the laws and records and so on of another state. And that's a very good thing in many ways because, well, and I really wouldn't want to go into the license thing, but it's something you're all familiar with. So if you have a driver's license in whatever state you're from, whether it's Ohio or New York or wherever, and you drive into the other states, your license is as valid there as it is in your state or its state of origin. Well, in this case, they were saying that because the Constitution allowed for the governor of a state where a damage had been done or a crime had occurred or whatever, he could ask for the suspected criminal to be sent back to his state for trial. And in this case, with Dred Scott, he had left a slave state, so in effect he had stolen himself and taken himself to a place where there wasn't slavery, and the owners wanted to get him back, and so there was this lawsuit, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, I believe, because at the lower levels, I believe the jurors were not convicting. They were saying, he's here, now he's free, and so on. But the Supreme Court, under Canis, I believe it was, said, no, this man is property, and he's stolen from wherever, so on. So the Supreme Court actually did a bad decision. And this tells you one other thing. The Supreme Court is not supreme in the way that the good Lord is supreme. The Supreme Court is made up of fallible individuals who might make stupid, mean, un-American decisions sometimes, and those decisions can later be revoked, repealed, gotten rid of, whatever. I mean, they'll always be, well, they should always be on the books, but they have no effect anymore, right? Anyway, so this goes on to say this nation survived until, excuse me, that's a typo, this notion survived until the 1850s, when prosecutions under the Fugitive Slave Act were largely unsuccessful because juries refused to convict. So as a juror, you may refuse to convict if the law is bad. Then, judges began to erode the institution of free juries, leading to the absurd compromise that is the current state of the law. While our courts uniformly state juries have the power to return a verdict of not guilty, whatever the facts, they routinely tell jurors the opposite. So they tell you, you judge the facts, I'll judge the law. The judge says this too. Yes?
Was the Dred Scott decision ever revoked?
Excuse me, what?
Was the Dred Scott decision ever revoked?
Yes, it was. Yes, I don't know how, all the details or the ins and outs of it or the follow-up case, but obviously, yes, the Dred Scott decision, a man is no, there's no longer any place in this country legally that says, or lawfully, that says that a man is property. Now, it can be argued that there's a lot of so-called law that tends to treat us this way, but that's another matter. Anyway, the end of this article says, and there's more in between, which you'll read on your own, I hope, but it says, perhaps the community should educate itself, then citizens called for jury duty could teach the judges a needed lesson in civics. So that's kind of the main thing that I wanted to say about that. And by the way, this little booklet has lots of wonderful quotations from assorted founders and other people, and from court cases, and so on. It also has kind of questions and answers about this. It has material on Patrick Henry and lots of other people. And the case about William Penn is in here. You can read the details yourself. There's another very famous colonial American case called the John Peter Zenger, or it's referred to, John Peter Zenger was the object of the case. He was a publisher in colonial America. He said a lot of very true things, but very negative things about the governor of his colony. And that governor, of course, was irate. He'd been appointed by the king, and according to their law, nobody could say anything against the governor. The jury said, we know the man published this stuff, but the law is wrong because the stuff he published was true. It wasn't a libel of the guy, it was true. So anyway, I do want each of you to have this. It also does have, now I know you all have constitutions and declarations and so on already, but it does have a general index to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration and so on. They're all in here. So there's just another little bit of announcement that I want to make, and most of you that have been affected, you probably received a little note from me. This year, for the first time, I could not use the usual standard of deciding between advanced classes and regular classes, because there's a lot of smart people that, for whatever reason, kind of messed up on the exam today, or yesterday. And so this time, I took some other factors into account and decided that what I would do is give sort of conditional advanced class status, and the condition would be that you went to maybe a certain